Dr. Daniel Amen, anxiety and depression get roped together in one uniform discussion all the time, but as you and I know, there are definitely differences between the two. Can you give a simple breakdown of the difference between the two? And then I'd really like to go into some strategies as to how people can start to bulletproof their way from them so that they're not dealing with it as much.
Well, they run together 75% of the time. So it's sort of an artificial distinction.
Okay, I'm not gonna lie, my wife wears this a lot more than I do. This is the Bond Charge red light therapy mask, and they are really darn legit when it comes down to the science. I know it looks goofy, but I popped a link down below. If you use red light therapy, you probably dig this. So one of the benefits of red light therapy with photobiomodulation is obviously potentially more energy into the mitochondria, right? You get this kind of light that influences the mitochondrial function. But this occurs in our skin too, in our face. So as far as complexion is concerned, I'm on camera a lot, so I recently tried it out when they sent me one, and I was like, holy cow, I actually noticed a difference in my complexion. So the cool thing is you can adjust intensity. I can go pretty low, I can go pretty high, and I can also add near infrared as well. So it's got red light, and I can also add near infrared, which makes it pretty cool. So the only thing you're having to do is wear this for maybe 10, 15 minutes per day or every other day. You don't have to do it for a very long time. But you're seeing a lot of people really checking these out lately because they're taking the technology between red light therapy just for bioenergetics and all this and applying it to complexion and how we feel and how we look. So that link down below will save you 15% off if you want to give it a try. They use the proper wavelengths. Bond Charge is really, really good when it comes down to scientifically backed stuff. So they've got their sauna blanket, which I've talked about in other videos. They've got their PEMF mat, which is like a pulse electromagnetic field. So they're really cutting edge with a lot of sort of the biohacking stuff. So if you're trying to kind of improve your complexion, if you're trying to get a little bit more energy and vitality look to your face, there's even some evidence that it could potentially help with wrinkles, which is always a plus, and it may actually help with collagen formation. So that link is down below in the description. Again, 15% off using that code DeLauer15 for the Bond Charge red light therapy face mask.
I think of depression correlated with sadness, and then the physiological symptoms that go along with sadness. So low energy, trouble sleeping, memory's not good, concentration's not good, but you tend to be hopeless, helpless, feel worthless, maybe even to the point where you think life is not worth living, that you can really get into dark thoughts. Anxiety is you're often in the future with fear, that you're afraid, that you're tense, that you're nervous, that your body is tight. But I often see depression as you're in the past with regret, and anxiety as you're in the future with fear. The problem is they run together all the time, and the foundational piece to both of them are what I call ANTs, or automatic negative thoughts, the thoughts that come into your mind automatically and ruin you. And if you're ever going to bulletproof anxiety and depression, you have to bulletproof your mind by, I adopted my two nieces. Both their parents were substance abusers and pretty terrible parents, so we adopted them. And the older one, who's just graduating from high school and college at the same time, she's 18, but she's got an AA degree as well, so I'm so proud of her. And she said, I have to develop a Department of Homeland Security. So I have to, and this is not a political discussion at all, but I have to have borders on my mind. And I can't let the troublemakers in, cross the border because they'll hurt me. And I love that she's guarding and protecting her mind from the invasive thoughts that just sort of pop up.
Interesting. So what are some things that we can do to set up sort of a DHS around our mind?
So this is so important. your input often determines your output. And so you have to guard what you allow into your mind, which means you have to turn off the news. Because the news is no longer the news. I mean, let's just be honest. The news is there to get you to buy things. And so what hooks you, what hooks humans is fear. And so if it bleeds, it leads their story, and your mind will just be assaulted with negativity and anxiety. And I think we saw that so clearly during the pandemic, where they're leading with death tolls. So I think really be careful about what you allow into your mind. You have to be careful with who you hang out with, because people are contagious. If you struggle with depression, I mean, in my mind, I'm a doctor, first thing I think about is, how's your thyroid? How's your diet? What's your level of exercise? What's your omega-3 fatty acid levels? Do you have inflammation in your body? And so getting physically healthy and assessed is, I think, critical to that. So I often tell people, know your important numbers, that becomes absolutely essential. And then know your brain type. It's something very unique to me. I've looked at 230,000 scans, and what I realized, everybody's different. And I came up with 5 primary types and 16 combined brain types. So are you balanced, which means you just tend to be happy? Are you spontaneous, which means you're creative, you're an out-of-the-box thinker, but you're late? My ADD folks fit in that group. Are you persistent? You need things a certain way, and you're like a dog with a bone, but it can be bad in that you can also be oppositional and argumentative. Are you sensitive? Do you tend to be sad, but you're also deeply empathic? Or are you cautious? You're like always 10 minutes early because your brain just is predicting all the wrong things that will happen, which can be good, but also can make you suffer. And then the other types are combinations of those. And so if you know your type, you actually know what makes you happy. So for example, the balanced person could be happy with most anything because they're very flexible. The spontaneous person gets bored really easily. They love surprises and need novelty. The persistent person hates surprises and doesn't like novelty. They like, and just sort of a funny example, I grew up Roman Catholic. My mother was serious about this. Nobody becomes Roman Catholic unless you're the persistent brain type. If you're the persistent brain type, you're like, oh no, I want to be Catholic because it's predictable. Like the Mass is always the same. Now, I'm probably getting in trouble for saying it, but it's absolutely my experience. If you pick something that's ritualistic and it makes you comfortable, it's because you have a brain that fits that. And so for each of these, I have certain supplements that help them, like the balance. I think everybody should take multiple vitamin, high quality omega-3 fatty acid supplement, and optimize your vitamin D level. Everybody should do that. So that's for the balanced type, but all the other types too. The spontaneous type, they have sleepy frontal lobes, so something like tyrosine, the amino acid building block for dopamine, can be very helpful for them. Don't give that to the persistent person because they're going to focus more on the things that bother them. They need a serotonin boost, which you can do with something like 5-HTP. For the sensitive group, love saffron because saffron has been shown in 24 randomized controlled trials to be equally effective to antidepressants. And for the cautious type, I have a whole bunch of things I like, but GABA, magnesium, theanine, ashwagandha can be helpful. So if you know your type, you can supplement it. So making sure your body's healthy, especially your thyroid, not believing every stupid thing you think is so important. For depression, exercise, head-to-head against antidepressants, found to be equally effective. If you're anxious, things like hypnosis, meditation, so good.
I think there's two very important things. The first one is something that I want to just touch on. The first one is one that I can move quickly through, and that's saffron. And I just want to echo your sentiments there, because that is something where in the last year and a half or so, I've become rather obsessed with some of the research in it, particularly with sleep. And I'm like, why is this not talked about more? And almost to the point of frustration, because it's really not talked about. And all the data is there. So I'm with you on that. We could probably go on and on about that, because you obviously know more about it than I do, but it's just for those that are watching, look into saffron. It's powerful. The other thing that I wanted to mention here was simply that people are not willing to make the lifestyle changes that they sometimes know they need to make, because there's this big elephant in the room that they have to address first, and that's the fact that they think everything needs to be dealt with through an SSRI or whatever. And I'm not a doctor, so I can't say, hey, you should take one or you should not. But what I can say as a regular human being is that has dealt with anxiety and depression for my entire life, is that the lifestyle changes that I have made significantly stronger improvements on my life than any SSRI I was ever on when I was younger, when I was overweight. They've made a bigger difference than benzodiazepines. They have been the biggest game changer in my life. And when I shout from the rooftops, and I'm kind of loud and sometimes obnoxious about how the lifestyle that I adopted changed my life, it's not because I lost 100 pounds, it's because it changed this for me, and it liberated me from what felt terrible before.
I love that. I'm not opposed to medicine.
Obviously,
it's just
I'm not
never the first thing I think about. I think, okay, accurate diagnosis, which is why I look at people's brains. Psychiatrists are the only medical doctors who never look at the organ they treat. Think about that. I mean, that's a little insane. Making diagnoses based on symptom clusters with no biological data, that's just nuts. And then to give you something like a benzo or an SSRI that change your brain to need them in order for you to feel normal with no biological data, that's a shit show to me. And that's why there are 337 million prescriptions last year written in the United States for antidepressants. It's the wrong paradigm. First thing, accurate diagnosis, make sure your body's healthy, and if it's not, work to get your body healthy, because then your mind's going to be better, right? The whole point of your body is to carry around your brain. And if your body's not healthy, your brain not going to be healthy, and it's going to tell you it's not healthy because it's sad, or because it's anxious, or because you have brain fog and your memory's not good. So, body healthy, make sure you have the right nutrients, don't believe every stupid thing you think, and then train your mind to help you rather than hurt you. But it's really hard if you're overweight. It's really hard, because being overweight all by itself increases inflammatory cytokines that we know trigger depression.
Yeah. It's also difficult once you are overweight to take those first steps. And one of the things that I always preach, no matter what, and this is very important, is that with action, everything else will follow. So whether it's taking a walk around the block, you don't have to be joining a gym today, but doing something to take those proper steps
forward.
I
like the tiny steps.
Okay.
Like some really tiny steps. The 3-second question. Whenever you go to make a decision today, is this good for my brain or bad for it? If I'm going to eat something, do I love it? And does it love me? Because you're in a relationship. It's like, I love pizza. Well, it's going to beat you up. Why would you be in an abusive relationship? Well, I love it. Well, that's sort of ridiculous, right? I mean, it's sort of like, well, I love him even though he's beaten me for years. No. As a psychiatrist, I'm encouraging people a lot that's not a good relationship for you. And people just have such bad relationships with food.
Yeah, that's very, very true. And I'm glad that someone that is as esteemed as you can recognize the importance of food, even whilst being someone that practices medicine. So, Dr. Daniel Amen, where can everyone find you?
They can find us at amenclinics.com, so Amen like the last word in a prayer. On Instagram at doc_Amen, DOC_Amen, or Doc Amen on TikTok.
Beautiful. As always, see you tomorrow.